As regard findings, this is a results from graphs related to total neuroscience funding worldwide. And this is referred to United States, and we can see from 2013 up to now to 2020, the number of funding has increased at least up to 2019. There is a little decrease in this year. And this is a comparison between funding in different fields of medicine. So as you can imagine, the number of funding for cancer research is the one that is the highest, while neurology and psychiatric disease come into the second place. So it's not so bad, but there is a big gap between cancer and neurology. And this is our data mainly referred to dementia or Alzheimer's. So you can see here, this is a report on trends in neuroscience. And here you can see the percentage of funding for the different field related to neurological or psychiatric disease. So broad neurological CNS disease is the top, and then pain and Alzheimer's or Parkinson come in to the third or fourth position. And again, here we can see that comparing the number of funding for dementia respect to cancer and cardiovascular disease, the number of funding is very lower compared to the two other fields. This is a report of the Alzheimer's Society and refers to funding of the UK. So probably to summarize, the funding are not so low compared to other disciplines, but of course compared to cancer or cardiovascular disease, there is a big gap.
Thank you, Lucia. So I will give you a brief information about the drugs in Alzheimer's disease and the clinical trials. We have some interesting statistics. So here on the right side and the above, we see the number of Alzheimer's disease clinical trials in 2019. So we have both the symptom modifying and the disease modifying clinical trials currently ongoing. And as you can see, the numbers are actually quite high. So this is an optimistic graph showing that we have a lot of candidates actually currently in the clinical trials. Especially we have good number of candidates in the phase 3 clinical trials, and we all hope to have some good news, because currently we do not have any disease modifying therapy in Alzheimer's disease. But considering these high numbers in the phase 3 clinical trials, I am optimistic that we can get some good news soon, and we can even get some good news as early as next March. But overall, I think this graph is quite informative, and it really shows that we have a lot of efforts happening in the AD field to push a drug into the market as soon as possible. And the below graph, I actually like that one a lot, although it's a bit like disappointing graph for us. So it just shows the probability of success for all clinical trials from 2008 to 19 in overall all diseases, and in the dark blue on the right side for the Alzheimer's disease. So we are actually doing good in phase 1 and 2, but as you can see in the phase 3, it is really disappointing and discouraging, but we have like 0-point success rate currently for Alzheimer's disease. And this is definitely an issue we need to solve as soon as possible. So if you go to the next slide now, again, this is actually a good figure to tell us that we need to be optimistic, because we have a lot of candidates in the clinical trials ongoing, and this graph is really extensive. I'm not gonna like go over everything, of course, but by just looking at this picture, I think you can really see the scope of the research. So we have 121 unique candidates in the clinical trials as of 2020, and we have several targets in mind, and we're really as the scientists working in this field, I think we're doing our best to solve this problem. And in the next slide, we see again more in details what are these targets. And I think, non-surprisingly, most of the clinical trials are focusing on anti-amyloid drugs. So on the left side also, you can really see nicely the trend. So the anti-amyloid drugs are actually the leading targets currently in the clinical trials, but with a decreasing trend. I think this is also interesting. And we see an increasing trend in the tau targeted drugs and also in the synaptic plasticity and the neuroprotection. And the yellow one, as you can see, it's also, for me, it's quite interesting, but it looks like that the research focus on inflammation and infection and the immune contribution to the Alzheimer's disease is also really increasing. And we have several drugs and different targets in both phase 2 and phase 3 trials, while the anti-amyloid ones are still the leaders of the clinical trials in the Alzheimer's disease field. And then in the next slide, we see actually the funding. So where is the funding coming for these clinical trials? So both for phase 2 and the phase 3, you see on the right side the information. It is mostly coming from the pharma companies. And I think this statistics also shows once again that we as academia should have close connections in the pharma companies, and we have to work together again to solve these problems. And especially in the phase 3 case, most of the drugs are actually supported fully by the biopharma companies. And another interesting take from this graph is this repurposed agent. So in addition to just like AD specific drugs, we also have some like growing numbers of repurposed agents in the pipeline. These are the drugs that is approved for non-AD indication and currently in trial for AD. And I think these are really mostly the drugs targeting the neuroinflammation or the vascular dysfunction, cardiovascular risk factors can be put in this category. And the repurposed agents are also quite promising in the phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. And in the last slide now, we again going to deep further into the funding. On the right side, you see the different companies actually investing a lot on the AD research, and I think overall neuroscience also. So we see Johnson & Johnson and the Biogen at the top, and within that list, I mean, for Switzerland, I think Roche is also an important player. And unfortunately, I mean, I think mainly because of this disappointing news on the phase 3 clinical trials and 0% success, some companies actually started to leave the neuroscience and the Alzheimer's disease field. I mean, the first things I think that Pfizer, for example, was an important player, and like in recent years, they decided to shut off like whole neuroscience R&D department, which is quite disappointing for us. And again, for Switzerland, Novartis is an important player, but they also had a lot of failures in the phase 2 and phase 3 phases, and they're also leaving the AD and the neuroscience field slowly. So the success in the ongoing trials would be also important to have the attention of the pharma companies again in the Alzheimer's disease field. And on the left side, we saw that graph already. So Lucia already went over that. But again, I will just emphasize that this graph is also, I think it's quite promising, because for the venture capital investment, neuroscience and the neurology overall, it has still a good place. And I think because, I mean, it's still, of course, it's a risky investment, but it still has a potential of high return. So I think that's why it's still interesting for the venture funding. So this is really a good news for the startup network also in Switzerland for small companies and the preclinical targets to get funding and get money from this venture funding. And overall, of course, we had disappointing news in recent years with lots of failing phase 3 clinical trials. But personally, I think we had great achievements in the diagnostic field over these last years. So we can now better design our clinical trials. We can characterize our patients better. So personally, I'm quite optimistic that we would have this breakthrough soon in the Alzheimer's disease field, and it would be really a good news overall for all neuroscience field, I would say. So with that, we conclude our presentation, and happy to discuss further with you on these subjects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia and Tuna. It's a really great insight into the landscape in the development and the research and development of drugs, and also looking at job opportunities in this field. clearly we are hopeful because we know that we are making progress, but I'm not sure whether the venture capitalists know that. They look at the stats, they look at the probability, and when they see a 0% return, this is not good news. So I myself work very close with the industry. It's very difficult to change the mindset, and I believe that the FDA approval of one drug, the aducanumab, would really open the way for new developments, especially in Europe, where investors are more conservative in general. Looking at your slide, it looks like that IPO are good for established companies, of course. IPO are from companies that are already on the market. But really we're lagging behind in terms of private investment for small enterprises. We are facing this issue in Switzerland, where we have many small companies in very different fields, from cancer to hematology to cardiovascular. But I don't know if we do have numbers on how many companies were established in the field of neuroscience or neurodegeneration. It doesn't have to be Alzheimer's disease. We know that dementia is a spectrum of disorder, or even for other conditions such as autism. I think we have very, very few ones. I'm talking about a handful, if not even less. So it's very difficult to give confidence to investors and also to the government in the end. We do have programs in Switzerland that foster innovation. I mean, our own initiative is supported by the InnoSwiss governmental organization, but I think it's very difficult to break the barrier of mistrust, because there is a certain mistrust in this field. And I had the opportunity to talk to at least 4 investors in Switzerland, and they wouldn't put their money, by no means. And so I'm wondering whether we should make a better effort to show that we're making progress, that we are understanding better the disease, that this is a dynamic disease that has the potential to be caught early on in time. And I think that we need all the efforts from companies such as Roche Diagnostic, for example, which is a leader in diagnostics, in order to stratify and segment better the population which is potentially at risk. And from there, I think we have an opportunity to move forward in tailoring better either preventive strategy or therapeutics that can be disease modifying, but also repurposing certain drugs. And I think that the notion that inflammation, infection, or cardiovascular disease can contribute to neurodegeneration, late onset neurodegeneration, is mounting. So in some sense, the role of the young advocates is really to bring this forward, to be able to draft a very simple and clear message to the public, saying we are making progress. We know our roadmap. We know our roadmap.